We were the kids who left the house after breakfast and weren't seen again until the streetlights called us home. Nobody scheduled our days. Nobody filmed them. Summer opened up in front of us 3 months wide, and we filled every hour with things that have mostly slipped out of the world since. Some of them went so quietly that we never noticed they were gone. We found 25. The ones a kid in 1970-something waited all year for, and we're going to walk through every one of them in order. If you grew up in it, you already know how this is going to feel. Number 1. Barefoot till September. The last bell of the school year rang sometime in early June, and the shoes came off in the backyard within the hour. From that afternoon until Labor Day weekend, most of us went without them. The soles of our feet turned to leather by the 4th of July. We could cross a gravel driveway, run over a blacktop road that had been baking since noon, and barely break stride. We learned which stretch of sidewalk held the afternoon heat and which manhole covers to leap over at midday. The day had almost no shape to it. There was breakfast, and there was the one rule every house on the block agreed on without ever writing it down. You came home when the streetlights came on. Everything between those 2 points was ours to fill. We filled it on foot first, then on wheels. The first thing a lot of us reached for got strapped onto the bottoms of those bare feet and tightened down with a little key we wore on a shoelace around the neck. Number 2. Skates and a key on a string. They were metal, and they clamped straight onto your school shoes. You fit the front plate over the toe and cranked the clamp down tight against the sole. The little key that did the tightening hung on a loop of shoelace around your neck, because losing it meant the afternoon was over. The wheels were steel, so the ride was loud and rough, and you felt every crack in the pavement come straight up through your shins. By the late 1970s, the shoe boot skate had taken over, the kind with the wheels built right in, and the old clamp-on pair went into the back of a closet with the key still tied to it. A lot of those keys are still in a junk drawer somewhere. The same square of sidewalk those skates tore up was also a canvas, if you had a box of color and a free afternoon. Number 3. Chalk on hot concrete. A hopscotch grid could live on the driveway for a week before rain took it. We drew the numbers crooked and threw a bottle cap for the marker. Then we hopped the squares until our mothers called us in. 4 square needed nothing but a sidewalk seam and a rubber ball. Some afternoons the whole driveway disappeared under color, a road map of a town that only existed until the next storm. The boxes of color are still on every store shelf. What went was the open afternoon to use them in, the empty street and the hours nobody was keeping track of. By the time most of us had kids of our own, the days were already spoken for. After all that dry pavement, the first cold thing of the day was usually a fine mist thrown sideways across the grass. Number 4. Running the sprinkler. The oscillating kind was the best kind. It sat in the middle of the lawn and swept a fan of water back and forth, ticking at each end of its arc before it came back. The dare was to run through the gap at the top. The half second when the spray stood straight up and come out the other side without getting your hair wet. Nobody ever managed it, which was the whole point. This was how a neighborhood cooled off before central air was in every house. Somebody's mother would drag the thing out after lunch and screw it onto the hose, and a half-dozen kids would turn up from 3 yards over within minutes, drawn by the sound. We ran until the grass turned to cold mud under our feet, and our lips went a little blue. Between runs, there was always a faster way to get a drink than going inside and tracking water across the kitchen floor. Number 5. A drink from the hose. You twisted the nozzle. Let the first hot slug of water spill out onto the grass and put your mouth right to the end of it. The water came through warm and went cold all at once. And it tasted faintly of rubber and metal, which somehow made it better on a 90-degree day. We know more now than we did then. The brass fittings and the plastic of an ordinary garden hose can carry lead, the sort of thing the Ecology Center turned up when it tested them years later. So no parent today would wave a kid over for a sip. Back then it was just the closest water there was. We drank gallons of it and thought nothing of it. That hose had one more job in it though, and it was the best job of the summer. Stretched out flat on the lawn, it made the longest slide a kid could ask for. Number 6. The slip and slide. Wham-O put it on the market in 1961, and within a few summers it was staked out on lawns all over the country. The idea had come from a man named Robert Carrier who watched his son and the neighbor kids sliding around on a wet concrete driveway. And he figured there had to be a safer surface for it. What he built was a long sheet of yellow plastic with a hose hooked to one edge, so the water ran down the whole length and kept it slick. You ran at it full speed across the grass, threw yourself down at the last second and skidded the length of it on your stomach. The smart kids added a squirt of dish soap to the water for more speed. The grass at the far end wore down to bare dirt by July, and so did the front of every bathing suit in the house. It stayed a fixture for decades, though the company eventually pulled it from store shelves around 1991, and a safety warning followed in 1993 after older and heavier riders got hurt coming off the end of it. The version we remember had no rules to it at all, just a hose, a sheet of plastic, and whatever slope the yard gave you. Not every kid had a backyard big enough for one. For them, and for the rest of us on the hottest days, there was bigger water across town. Number 7. The whistle for Adult Swim. The town pool was where the whole neighborhood ended up on the days it got too hot to do anything else. You paid a quarter, or you flashed a season pass your parents had bought in May, and you stayed until your fingers were pruned and your eyes burned from the chlorine. Once an hour, the guard stood up on the chair and blew one long blast, and every kid in the water had to climb out for the next 10 minutes. They called it Adult Swim. We sat dripping along the edge with our feet in the water, watching a handful of grown-ups do slow laps in a pool that had been ours a minute earlier, counting down until the guard waved us back in. A lot of those pools are gone now, closed or filled in when the town budget ran thin, and the ones that are left rarely fill up the way they used to. The kids who would have packed them are somewhere else. You could hear it coming from a few streets over, even with your head underwater. The bells. Number 8. Chasing the ice cream truck. The jingle reached you before anything else did, 3 or 4 streets off. Tinny and warped, and impossible to mistake for anything else. The whole block heard it at the same moment, and you have never seen kids move faster than the scramble that followed, tearing through the house for loose change and turning up the couch cushions. Good Humor had built the whole thing decades earlier. By the 1950s, the company ran around 2,000 trucks, and more than half its customers were under 12. Mr. Softy came along in 1956 with soft serve made right there in the truck. The man behind the window knew the regulars by name and knew which house had the kid who always came up a nickel short. Good Humor got out of the truck business itself by the mid-1970s, squeezed by competition and labor trouble, and the routes thinned out after that. The trucks that still come around are fewer and farther between. And half the time the kids are already inside looking at a screen when one rolls past, Some of us figured out that summer money worked in both directions. If you could buy a cold drink, you could sell one too. All it took was a card table out by the curb. Number 9. The stand on the corner. It was the first business most of us ever ran. A card table, a pitcher of Kool-Aid, and a sign in crayon that priced a cup at 5 cents, sometimes 10 cents if you were feeling ambitious. The powder came from a packet that cost a dime and made 2 quarts, which Edwin Perkins had figured out how to do back in 1927 up in Hastings, Nebraska. 10 glasses for 10 cents was the promise on the envelope. And it held up well enough to make a kid a quarter on a good afternoon. You learned about foot traffic without ever knowing the words for it. The good corners had shade and a steady stream of hot, thirsty adults walking by. You learned that your father would always buy the first cup and overpay for it. You do not see many of those tables anymore. A few towns started requiring permits. The coins gave way to cards. And the long, unscheduled afternoon a stand needs went the way of the chalk. The drink is still on the shelf. The table by the road mostly is not. There was a colder version of the same idea waiting in every freezer, the kind that came with 2 sticks so you could break it in half. Number 10. The popsicle you split. It came as a single frozen block with 2 flat wooden sticks running up the middle, scored down the center so you could snap it in half against the edge of the porch step. Half for you, half for whoever was standing there. And a small argument if the break came out uneven. Cherry and grape turned your tongue a color that lasted till supper. The juice ran down your wrist to your elbow faster than you could keep up with it. And the stick at the end had a riddle or a bad joke printed on it. Somewhere along the way the makers went to a single stick, and the whole ritual of breaking one in 2 and handing half over disappeared with the second stick. Most of what we ate that summer, though, we walked to get. A handful of coins and a few blocks was all it took. Number 11. Penny candy. Down the block. Every neighborhood had a store within walking distance, and we were trusted to walk to it alone by the time we were 7 or 8. You went with whatever you had found that morning, a quarter maybe, sometimes just a few coins off the dresser, and you came back with a small brown paper bag. The glass case sat right at kid height. You pointed. The owner dropped each piece into the bag, and he kept the running total in his head out loud. Wax bottles, candy buttons on a paper strip, ropes of red licorice. A penny or 2 still bought a single piece. The corner store closed when the chains came in. The prices climbed past anything a pocket of change could cover, and a kid walking to the store alone became a rarer sight every year. Coins only carried you so far. The real range came on 2 wheels, and most of it had a banana seat. Number 12. The banana seat bike pack. 5 or 6 of them would pour out of a driveway at once and take the whole street, and by noon they had the run of the neighborhood. Schwinn had started it in 1963 with the Stingray, the first one built with the long seat and the tall handlebars that curved back toward you like a chopper. Kids in California had already been rigging their own bikes to look like little motorcycles, and Schwinn just gave the country the factory version. You could fit a second kid on the back of that long seat, or balance one on the handlebars, and you tore around all day with a baseball card clothes pinned into the spokes to make a motor sound. Nobody wore a helmet. There were no phones to carry. And once you rode off in the morning, you were genuinely unreachable until you turned up for supper. The one thing that could call the whole group home was the streetlights. They came on at dusk, all down the block at once, and that was the signal. No matter how good the game was or how far from home you had ridden, By the early 1980s, the banana seat had given way to the low, knobby BMX bike, and the look we grew up on was suddenly old. A bike could carry you clear out of the neighborhood to the one piece of ground nobody's parents owned. Number 13. The game on the vacant lot. Every part of town had one. It was the empty parcel between two houses where nothing had been built yet. We turned it into a ball field without anyone's permission. A tree was second base. A patch of bare dirt was home. The ball was wrapped in electrical tape where the cover had come loose, and the bat had belonged to somebody's older brother. Teams got picked on the spot and argued over just as fast. There was no umpire and no scoreboard. Enough kids showed up to make two sides, and the game ran until it was too dark to see the ball. If a window got broken, everyone scattered, and the guilty kid came back later to own up to it. That open ground is mostly built on now. The lots filled in with houses. The games moved indoors and onto leagues with schedules and parents in folding chairs. And the pickup game on a weedy field organized itself out of existence. Number 14. Down at the creek, past the last house where the lots gave out, a lot of neighborhoods had water running through them. There was always a trickle of water somewhere past the edge of the subdivision, behind the new houses, or down the slope from the road. And we spent whole afternoons in it. Sneakers got soaked and stayed soaked. You came home with a coffee can holding 2 crawdads and a minnow, all of which went back the next day. We caught things and let them go again. We built little dams out of rock that washed out by morning and turned over every flat stone to see what lived beneath it. Nobody knew exactly where we were, and nobody worried. The water was cold even in August, and it ran clear enough to see your feet on the bottom. The same pull that sent us to the creek sent us to build something too, a place that was only ours. Number 15. A fort of our own. It got built out of whatever the alley and the construction site down the road gave up. Scrap 2x4s, a sheet of plywood, a door somebody had thrown out, all of it dragged to a back corner of the yard or up into the crook of a tree. The roof never kept the rain out. That was not the point. The point was that it belonged to us and to no adult, a place with a rule about who could come in, and a password that changed every week. We held meetings in it about nothing. We hid in it from younger brothers and sisters. A fort needed empty ground and a pile of loose junk to build from, and tidier neighborhoods with less spare lumber and less spare time slowly stopped producing either. A few traditions came out only once or twice a whole summer, at the cookout, when the food was as much a game as a meal. Number 16. The seed spitting contest. Somebody's father would split a watermelon down the middle on a picnic table covered in newspaper, and the real event began once the eating slowed down. You took a mouthful, worked a seed up to the front, and let it fly as far out into the yard as you could manage. Distance was everything. Accuracy did not count, and aiming at your cousin was frowned on, but never actually stopped. The black seeds were the ammunition. Somewhere in the years that followed, the seedless melon took over the produce aisle and quietly ended the whole sport. You can still find a melon with seeds if you look, but you have to search. Not everything in the yard was that harmless. One backyard game from those years would not survive the decade. Number 17. Lawn darts in the yard. They came 4 to a box. Big weighted things with a metal point on one end and plastic fins on the other, and you threw them underhand at a plastic ring laid out on the grass. It was a lawn game, sold right alongside horseshoes and badminton, and for a couple of decades it sat in half the garages on the street. The game ran into trouble with regulators through the 1980s. After a long review, the Consumer Product Safety Commission banned the sale of them outright, with the ban taking effect in December of 1988. Families were told to throw out the sets they still had. That was the end of it as a store-bought game. And it is the reason a kid today has most likely never seen one in a backyard. The ones already out there hung around for years, in garages and at yard sales, slowly disappearing. If you grew up with a set, you remember exactly where it was kept. The 4th of July had its own kind of fire, handed right to us, and nobody thought twice about it. Number 18. Sparklers. After dark, an adult would light the end of a stiff wire for you off a punk stick or a cigarette, and for 30 seconds you held a fistful of white sparks out at arm's length. You wrote your name in the air with it. You watched the burnt wire glow orange and knew better than to touch that end. The smell of the smoke was the smell of the holiday itself. A few houses down, the older kids and the dads had something louder going off over the fence, the sort of thing that is illegal in most places now, and was only half legal then. We mostly stuck to the sparkler and the snake pellet on the sidewalk, and that was plenty. When the show was over, the long drive home meant climbing into the very back of the family wagon, where the best seat in the car was. Number 19. Loose in the way back. The station wagon had a third zone behind the back seat that every family called something different. The way back, the very back, the rumble. On a long drive that was where the kids rode, stretched out on a folded blanket with no seat, and nothing to hold on to, facing backward out the rear window at the road unspooling behind you. You waved at the drivers behind you and got the trucker 2 lanes over to pull his air horn. On the overnight stretches you slept back there, with the warm hum of the tires coming up through the floor, and the highway lights sweeping across the ceiling. The seatbelt and child seat laws that came in later put an end to all of it, and for good reason, though that is not really how it felt at the time. At the time, it felt like the best seat in the car. Most of the kids who rode back there turned out fine, and every one of them remembers it. Some nights, the wagon was not headed home at all. Number 20. The drive-in in pajamas. It was pointed at a giant screen in a field on the edge of town. Your parents loaded the car at dusk, and you went in your pajamas, because the second feature would not end until long past your bedtime, and everyone knew you would be asleep before it did. You parked in a long row facing a screen the size of a house, hung a metal speaker on the window, and settled in. The drive-in theater hit its peak in 1958, when there were better than 4,000 of them across the country. Then a string of things worked against them at once. A 1966 law pushed the start of daylight saving time, which kept summer skies light until 9 o'clock, and the movie from starting until late. The land a drive-in sat on became worth more as a shopping center. Television, and then the videocassette recorder, kept families home. By the end of the 1980s, most of them were gone, and the few hundred that held on did it on nostalgia and stubbornness. The playground down under the screen, the snack bar that smelled of popcorn and bug spray, the kids in sleepers passed out in the way back by intermission. That whole picture belongs to a narrow window of years. Music came home from those nights on a small radio that fit in the palm of your hand. Number 21. The transistor radio. It ran on a 9-volt battery and fit in a shirt pocket, and the sound came out of a single speaker the size of a quarter, thin and tinny, and turned all the way up. You held it to your ear on the school bus. You set it on a towel at the beach and balanced it on the porch rail after dark. The whole neighborhood heard the same songs over the same plumber, because there were only so many stations and everybody's little speaker was tuned to the same one. A song would come on and 3 different yards would turn it up at once. You learned the words without trying, because the radio played them 40 times a week. Private headphones changed that later. And then the players that held your whole collection, and the shared sound of a street all listening to one station went quiet. Now everyone is listening to something, and no one else can hear it. When the light finally went, a different set of games began. The kind that needed the dark to work. Number 22. Tag in the Last Light. There was a half hour after supper, when the sky went from gold to gray and shapes started to lose their edges, that belonged to a whole set of games. You could not have played them at noon. They needed the dark coming on. Kick the Can ran on one empty coffee can in the middle of the street, and a great deal of hiding. Flashlight tag turned a single beam into the thing that got you caught. Ghost in the Graveyard sent one kid out into the dark to be the ghost while the rest counted on the porch, working up the nerve to come find him. You ran across 4 or 5 yards that were not yours, ducking through hedges and around the dark sides of garages. Nobody ever came out to ask what you were doing on their grass. The streetlights had not come on yet. That stretch right before they did was the last free hour of the day, and we used every minute of it. There was one way to stretch the night and all the way to morning out on the screen porch. Number 23. A night on the screen porch. On the hottest nights before air conditioning made every bedroom the same temperature, the coolest place in the house was outside on the sleeping porch. You dragged out a cot or rolled a sleeping bag onto the glider, and you slept behind the gray mesh that kept the bugs out and let the air through. You lay there listening to the neighborhood wind down. A screen door slapped somewhere. A dog settled. The June bugs ticked against the mesh all night, drawn to the one light still burning, and a sprinkler somebody forgot to shut off hissed in the dark. You could hear a train if your town had tracks. You fell asleep half outside with the whole summer night going on a few inches past the screen. Houses stopped being built with porches like that, and central air made the trip outside unnecessary. So the children who came after slept in cool, sealed rooms and never knew the difference. Every one of those nights ended the same signal, the one we had been ignoring since we were small enough to argue with it. Number 24. When the streetlights came on, no watch ran a kid's whole day. One thing did, and it stood on a pole at the corner. It buzzed, flickered, and then steadied into a pale glow, all of them coming up at once down the length of the block, and that was the only curfew most of us ever had. You did not need a parent to call you in. You saw the light come up, or a friend set it for you, and the game broke up wherever it stood. Bikes turned for home. Whoever was it stayed it until tomorrow. You ran the last block in the new dark with your heart going, because being out much past that glow was the one line you did not cross. It was a loose rule and a soft one, but the whole neighborhood kept it, which is what made it work. Every parent trusted the same light. Every kid obeyed it without ever being told why. Most of us could not tell you the summer it stopped meaning anything. The kids came in off the street for good, the porches emptied, and the light on the pole kept coming on every night over yards that had gone quiet. It still comes on. There is just no one left out under it. There was one thing worth being late for, and we chased it right up until that glow came on. Number 25. Fireflies in a jar. The first one blinked low in the grass while there was still a little blue left in the sky, and then there were a dozen, then too many to count, rising up out of the lawn and the hedge line and hanging in the air over the whole backyard. We caught them in our hands gently, the way we had been taught, and watched the light pulse on and off against our cupped fingers. Your mother had already poked holes in the lid of an old mason jar with a nail and dropped a little grass inside. You filled it over the course of an evening and held it up like a lantern, the glow coming and going in your hands. The deal was always the same. You let them go before bed, and they lifted out of the open jar a few at a time and went back to blinking over the lawn. There are fewer of them now. The Xerxes Society, which keeps track of them, points to the lawns we pave and treat and the lights we leave burning all night, and counts a real share of the species in trouble. A child in a lot of places will go a whole summer now and never see the lawn light up the way it did for us. That was the end of the day, and in a way, the end of all of it. We were the last ones out every night, chasing a light we could hold for a minute, and then had to let go. None of us knew we were living through the last of anything. It was just summer, the way summer had always been, and we figured it would go on like that forever. The light still comes on at the corner every evening, right on schedule. The same pale glow over the same street. The difference is the street itself. The bikes are put away. The yards are empty. The mason jar is back on a shelf in the garage with the holes still punched in the lid. We got the whole of it. The barefoot mornings, the long unwatched afternoons, the last free hour before the streetlights called us in. We did not save any of it on purpose. It happened to us, and then it was over. And most of it slipped away so quietly that we only notice now, looking back, how much of it is gone. If you lived it, nobody has to explain it to you. You can still feel the warm vinyl against the backs of your legs and taste the cold water out of the hose. The bells still carry 3 streets off. The lawn still fills with light at dusk if you let it. We were the last ones out under the streetlight, and we are the ones who remember it now.